My name is Moyez Dharsee. I'm joined by my colleagues Fang and Susan. We're from Indoc Research, and also joining this session, this talk is Patrick Bay from Chariè. It's going to be a joint presentation, including a demo on TVB-Cloud workflows within the virtual research environment, GDPR compliant resources. So a few words about the VRE itself. It's been a collaboration between Indoc and Chariè and the Berlin Institute of Health. As Petra mentioned earlier, it's a GDPR ready platform that is enabling research teams across institutions to store and share and work on their data, complex data sets, multimodal data sets, and of course data sets that have sensitive information. The platform is deployed within the Chariè IT infrastructure, but at the same time, its architecture is quite agnostic to the particular infrastructure or IT environment, and it's quite portable. And we'll hear more about that a little bit later. The platform is actually up and running, and you can visit the site actually, and I'll just pull it over here just to give you a sense of what it looks like, vre.chariè.de. You can go there and learn a lot more. We don't have time to dive into too many of the details today, but you can go here and find out about the various tools and resources that are available, workbench tools, for example, as well as documentation. There's quite a bit of extensive documentation there, so we invite you to have a look when you get a chance. So just refreshing everybody on this slide that Petra showed earlier, and the very high-level view of the various features and components of the platform, the portal, the green room, the VRE core, data flowing into the green room initially to be prepared, for example, pseudonymized and curated in other ways before making those data more broadly available to research teams. And then there's a number of functionality in the core. So the other point to make here is that this slide makes things look, at a high level, very simple, but of course there's a lot of complexity behind this, and that's what we wanted to dive into with you today. This is the next slide, which shows some of the complexities at the implementation level, the actual deployment of the platform. And this is where I'll hand it over to Fang to walk us through some of the technical building blocks and development processes that we've been using to build the virtual research environment. So over to you, Fang.
Thanks, Moyez, and good afternoon, everyone. Today, it's a pleasure to present some technical aspects of the VRE, and followed by the brief walkthrough of our development cycle. After having seen the high-level architecture of the VRE, briefly introduced by both Moyez and Petra, so this diagram really gives the deployment view of it. The VRE platform is deployed on Chariè's research network, leveraging the security measures already implemented by the Institute, such as a firewall and a user identity management system. The VRE adopts a microservice architecture pattern, so the platform functionalities are supported by multiple individual services instead of a monolithic application. So each of the service is containerized into a unit and called a pod, and that is orchestrated and managed by Kubernetes. The VRE deployment is divided into a few large zones by either the data sensitivity or the functionalities. And from the left to right in this diagram, there are green room zone, utility zone, the VRE core zone, just to name a few. The oscillation between those zones are realized with the Kubernetes namespace and network policies. For instance, the services deployed in the VRE core zone cannot directly communicate with the green room, since the green room is the place where the data may contain the sensitive information. The VRE is built to be flexible and can be easily extended to include a specialized deployment of third-party services and for a better interoperability. This has enabled the VRE to provide custom features that are not natively developed by the VRE. So in fact, we recently integrated a few TVB services with the VRE. The TVB backend was deployed inside one of such extension zones. And I believe Patrick in the later part of the presentation will tell us more about it. At this point, you may just wonder, how exactly those individual services are collaborating to perform a function or support user interactions. So let's just go to next slide and to look at the architecture from a different view. This is obviously this is a subset of the whole process view of the VRE architecture, and this is the same diagram I used to explain the data upload process to my team at the very early days of the VRE development. So I will just walk this through once more with you guys. So we start from the step one. The user start using the VRE portal to upload the data, and the request will then be forwarded to the API gateway. And API gateway will be able to know, which underlying service this request should be responded. So the step three, but before that, API gateway will also forward the request to the authentication service just to make sure this user has enough privilege to access the underlying resources. And then after that step is passed, then our service is going to pass the request into the upload service because the user wanted to upload the data. So at this point, an upload service will do the job and then make sure the data is uploaded. And after the data is completed, after data upload is completed, step 5, so upload service will raise a message and push that event into the messaging queue. And then here, there are a couple of things may happen. The messaging queue receives such an event, and this event also includes some of the payload. And then the messaging queue will continue to forward this event to the pipeline service, for example, and try to trigger some of the automated pipelines. And after the pipeline is completed, the pipeline will acknowledge, my task is completed, and then will tell the messaging queue, and also this is done. And then after that, the messaging queue will also acknowledge, so everything, all the pipeline has been completed, and also let the upload service know. So at this point, we would consider the upload process is pretty much completed. And then the upload service will do update the metadata, the step 9, update the metadata, just to create an entry and to tell the system we got a new file, and then some pipeline has been executed, and also some of the attributes of the data has also been reported in the metadata service. And obviously, we need to log. We need to step 10, and upload service also needs to talk to the logging service that deployed as part of the system to log what exactly happened. And then the upload service will tell the WebSocket, step 11, and the WebSocket is connected to the web portal. So from user's perspective, after they click the button upload, and then after maybe a couple of seconds, even to a couple of minutes, and they will receive a notification from the portal. Everything is completed now. So this completes this upload process. So this microservice architecture definitely brings some of the obvious benefits, just to name a few. And the services have a single responsibility, therefore they're small and easily maintained, since the business scope of each service is quite narrow and focused. And also with the help of the Kubernetes, high availability can be done at the service level. If you look at the API gateway, we got 2 orange gears. So that basically means we always have 2 copies of API gateway service running at any point in time. And the services are also independently scalable. If you look at a pipeline service, for example, so usually we only spin off just one instance of the pipeline service, but in case there are many pipelines needs to be executed at the same time, so Kubernetes will help the platform to spin up more copies of the pipeline service. And also, from the development side, and the services are independently developed, enabling the team to be agile and autonomous. So the development of the logging service, for example, will not be blocked or will block any other services. At the same time, this just allows a very easy adoption of the new technology because each service has the freedom for the innovation as long as the API contract is respected. So now I want to zoom in just a little bit. So we will take a look at how these individual services are developed and delivered. Moyez, if you go to the next slide. So our team adopts the agile development methodology, and typically one release includes 2 sprints, and each sprint takes 2 weeks. In each release, we always start with picking the user stories from our development backlog, and I use these stories to identify the system operations, which represent the external request, and define a service level domain model, which represents the business capabilities and describing what features the platform can provide. So in this case, the font orange upload and metadata. Map it into domain model and a tag and a query, and in blue they're mapped as the system operations. So then we use the domain model to decompose the service in step 2. So therefore, we would identify the upload and metadata as two completely separate services, and of course, we should also identify some of the implied services to support the implementation. In this case, we need authentication, because we only allow the authenticated, the authorized user to be able to access the underlying services, and also the messaging queue to support the asynchronous communications. And then next, we will use the system operations we briefly mentioned to define the service APIs in step 3. Remember that we identify the tags and queries, right? So those are the verbs in the user story that give a pretty good hint, what the API endpoints should be developed. So in this example, we would develop a post API for the metadata service to allow the upload service bring in the text, and a get API for the portal just to query the metadata service. And after the developers complete the service creation and the APIs in step 3, and we enter into the final step, in step 4, so where the automated test and the delivery take place. In this step, and the source code and first gets pushed into the service repository, and we use Jenkins to trigger the unit test for that source code and builds the container and for that particular service. And we also use the Helm chart to define the template of the deployment specifications. So that may include, for example, environment variables and attributes of the service runtime, such as the network port and the number of the replica, and also the conditions for scaling up and down, etc. And then finally, the Jenkins will pull the Helm values and also the charts with the Terraform, just to make the deployment in a totally automated fashion. So the platform is developed on a dedicated dev environment, and then deployed on a dedicated staging environment for regression test and a user acceptance test as well, before it will be automatically deployed onto the production located inside Chariè's network. So this whole cycle repeats for every release. So this wraps up my part of the presentation, and happy to take questions at the end. So I will now hand over to Patrick, who will run a live demo of a TVB workflow in VRE.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Fed. Let me share my screen. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly go over a little bit more of a hands-on demonstration of what some of those functionalities that we heard about earlier can look like within the VRE, using a use case that we just follow along for some steps. So first, we've already seen the first homepage of the VRE. I logged in, and this is the initial site that I see with my project overviews if I logged into the VRE Chariè portal. So I'm selecting my use case and my project that is already established, and I see some overview of the last file management, etc., that has been going on. And I can instantly take a look at the data that it is available in the green room. So the green room, like we heard before, is a user-specific access restricted area where we can upload sensitive data that we, for example, want to pseudonymize. This is also the use case that we look at right now. We have some bits lesion data that we want to process that is still raw imaging, neuroimaging data where we want to perform defacing as an example. The VRE in general supports use cases on a whole range of pretty much project status So a fully automated pipelines that can be run, for example, on large cohort data, but it also enables researchers that have maybe been still in a prototyping phase and need an interactive mode to interact with these different steps and functionalities that are available. So this is what we are going to present in this demo real quick. So the data that I uploaded is twofold. One is a test subject following the BITS standard that we already heard about. And the other one is corresponding Open Minds meta information, as we also heard about 2 days ago, created with the there mentioned Python API. So the first step that I want to do is I want to use the implemented Workbench tools to process the neuroimaging data and to perform pseudonymization by defacing the imaging data. That means removing identifiable face-specific information from the subjects. To this end, I'll access the Workbench. So we just have already opened it. We have a Workbench command line interface version where I can access my data as we've just seen in the portal. So if I just present the data that I have uploaded here, you can see, if I actually click this, there we have the Open Mind schema and also the subject-specific data that we want to run. Another aspect that we uploaded is the corresponding container that we want to use, and this is the VRE defacing container. So all of this has been uploaded using the VRE portal and then synchronized with our Workbench. Of course, data upload into the VRE can be automated, for example, using software that we developed to integrate the clinical data from research packs within the Chariè, etc. But here, like I said, we're doing the manual approach. So using this, this data that we have, we want to run a Singularity container. Singularity here is just another software for containerization to run similar to the Docker containers that we've heard in Misha's talk. And all we do for this is everything is provided in our Workbench. We just run the Singularity container, give the input parameters that we want, and the corresponding container that we want to run. And we see it's already starting and processing our defacing pipeline. While that is running, it'll just take a minute or two, we will take a look at the other data that we implemented, integrated additional to the neuroimaging data. We have the Open Mind schema that we also have available in the VRE. If I can move this thing away to the next tab. As we see also at the VRE.chariè.e.kg, we have the ability to query and search knowledge graphs based on these Open Mind schemas that we implemented. We're going to now look at just the meta information for my project-specific data that I uploaded, but it also enables researchers to query and search data sets available within the VRE once they are more public available. So one of the examples, for instance, is the dataset version that I'm currently implementing. That is the raw initial data that I provided. And we see the JSON LD information, as we've heard on Tuesday, that we can study, but we can also look at the visual representation of this data to further search and query the data sets available, looking at corresponding links, either be it funding agency, modalities, properties of that data sets that are relevant for our researcher use case to make this searchable and queryable. So if we go back, this is still running. This is the command line interface for the Workbench that we're using. VRE also provides a graphical user interface to this same Workbench that we can access just by using the desktop version of the screen. You're logging in. Because as we just heard, the authorization process is already established. And then we can see that we have a standard virtual machine in that Workbench that we can use to even visually inspect the data that we want to use. We can check, for example, the data that we just created, and we see we have, for example, the defacing plots that our pipeline automatically created. No, it's still loading that. So we can either check those. Okay, just gave me a message. You can see my screen already, I think. Can check the created pipelines, the created plots, or we can even use other software that we are able to install in this graphical user interface for the Workbench, for example, MicroGL, to take a look at the 3D nifty image that we want to inspect and see that our defacing pipeline actually performed to our expectations. So once we are happy with the results of our defacing pipeline, the project administrator, in this case, will be the responsible person to push the data that is then available from our green room into the core zone to make it from this user-specific protected environment available for all VRE users that have been assigned to the specific project in the core zone. That is then available for further processing down the line once we had that pseudonymization pipeline completed. Within the core zone, we can again run containers for that specific pipeline that we defined, but we can also harness the power, as previously mentioned, of the Chariè IT high-performance environment, the high-performance computing service, by just tunneling from our VRE workbench into the high-performance environment at Chariè. So, and then we see that we're instantly connected and seamlessly integrated into the VRE, into the Chariè high-performance computing environment. And we can then run standard Slurm jobs, for example, with a provided batch scripts that we have that will run our scripts and then again just run a singularity container. In this case, our HCP pipeline container that we now want to use that is computationally very expensive to process the data using that cutting edge pipeline to be available within the HPC environment. Once we have this data fully processed, we can make it again available on either the workbench itself and also on the portal view. So the major tool that we use to manage the interaction between the different instances, because as Fang mentioned, they don't have, for example, the green room and the core zone, they don't have directly access to each other. We have a specific tool that handles the data management between the different instances and the synchronization to the portal overview, for example, of the data and the actual working instance of that data within the workbench. And that is the so-called VRE CLI that we can use to just run the synchronization of data, the input of data into, for example, as I showed before, the knowledge graph. So with all these different functionalities, we see in the latest version, the integration to the Blue-Brain Access, so to the knowledge graph application was added. We have this growing number of functionalities available to handle the communication of those different aspects of the VRE environment to handle the management. And at the end, again, have the data available, fully processed in our environment on the VRE core zone. For example, if you look here, we can see the overview of our fully deface corrected, fully processed data that will then enable to have a TVB ready data set that we can use in other software that is implemented, such as the TVB backend that we just where the GUI we have seen before by Lear, or other software visualization and semantic search software such as BrainCube, for example, that has also been established within the VRE environment. And because we're short on time and to allow a little bit of discussion, I'll just end it here and hand it back to Moyez for some final remarks.
So Moyez, will you continue, or was it the end of the entire presentation?
Yes, thank you, Patrick. You can see my screen again. Just to wrap up, I know we're short on time, but just to provide a summary, as we heard, the VRE provides this GDPR compliant environment for processing personal health research data, incorporates a number of tools and services. Very interesting, this was actually a collaborative co-design effort across the various groups, the development teams, as well as the actual research teams in designing and continually evolving the platform.
We do not see your screen. We lost your screen. In case you want to
try again.
Yes,
can you see it now?
Now it's visible.
Okay, thank you. So we heard from Patrick, particularly in the capabilities that are in the VRE to support the TVB-Cloud, and they include these various features for isolating and preparing, pseudonymizing the data, running the various pipelines, being able to standardize our data sets and make them discoverable, and being able to, of course, run the multi-scale simulations and be able to visualize the data. There's a lot more coming. There's much more work to do as we continue to integrate the various tools and standards within the VRE, some of which are shown here and that we heard from earlier. We're also now gearing up for a full production deployment of the TVB-Cloud platform within the VRE environment later in 2022. We're also gearing up for an open source release of the code base for the VRE framework and baseline platform itself. And as Petra mentioned, we're excited about the upcoming work with in building the health data cloud and integration with EBRAINS. So that's it, and I'll just like to acknowledge the various people that have been involved in all of this work. Of course, the brain simulation section led by Petra at Chariè and BIH, and various members of that team that are supporting that, the IT team at Chariè and BIH, the Virtual Brain Cloud consortium with which we've been working very closely, the Health Data Cloud consortium that we are about to launch into, and our team, our extended team at Indoc Research based in Canada and Germany. And I'd like to thank the organizers of this workshop and this talk for having us present today.